Welcome everyone. Experiments and survey design. Under research methodology, we will be talking about exactly what needs to be done to find out the best outcome for a research in terms of experiment and probably of survey design. Now, the research design process. Now, what is the most important thing which I have been telling it to you is the definition of the problem that you want to make research upon, the problem onto which you seek solutions to. So, first and foremost thing is selection of the research topic. Then probably we'll come into the design. Now, this is where the research design, should it be an experimental basis or should it be made on a survey basis? Framing of the sample design, thereby collection of data, the analysis, the editing, the data mining, the data processing, the data coding, probably is what we are looking into it. Last but not the least is writing the research report that becomes the fulcrum of the research, where you want to give your output for the consumption of the general public and the scientific community, or perhaps the research community who are more interested into this. So yes, the research design process is a step-by-step process of selecting the topic, framing the design, probably taking a taking a decision about the sample design that we are looking into. It once taken done, you start collecting data. Data needs to be screened, mined, analyzed, processed, and probably the outcome should be promoted in form of writing the research report. So characteristics of good research, and we will be continuing it for the next particular presentation, so next particular screen also. One, it should be grounded in fundamental theories, absolutely grounded on fundamental theories, absolutely accepted by all community members. It should have embedded into the environment. There has to be a feasibility of implementation. Obviously, yes, we cannot do research on space with only layman's equipment or perhaps machineries. We need to have high-end scientific equipment for that, for making space exploration and research out there. So you need to understand what is feasible, what is there at your disposal, and based on the feasibility of implementation, your research design should be worked upon it. Then we should be talking about redundancies and efficiency, as in the characteristics of good research design. A research design should be flexible. Now, what happens is we have something called the hypothesis, the null hypothesis, and the alternative hypothesis. So we believe that the outcome of a research should be X, Y, Z. So opposite of X, Y, Z, if the outcome is not X, Y, Z, then what will be the opposite? Maybe A, B, C. So we should be flexible to accept the fact that whatever we have fundamentally grounded upon our assumption might be completely wrong. So it should be flexible, should be economical, it should be unbiased per se, it should fulfill the objectives of the research, it should be more appropriate to all aspect of research. When I say appropriate, it should be more acceptable by every branch of science as far as possible. So it should be appropriate not only the scientific community but to the layman public also. So yes, we should talk about research to be economical, flexible, unbiased, objective, and appropriate for all aspect of research. The outcome should give me absolutely accurate result as far as possible, with the confidence level of over 90%, 95%, if possible 99%. It provides scientific base for this research. It should also facilitate to complete the research work within the stipulated time. Function of research design, what do we look into it? It provides a blueprint of research. When I say blueprint, it gives me other addendum for further research. Now this further research can be completely different by changing one parameters, by changing one environment, and so on. That is what we are looking for towards it. This is what should be the actual aim for research per se. It limits the boundaries of research activities. It enables investigation, anticipated potential problem, and that is what functions of research design is all about. Provides a blueprint. It helps us to uh, set boundaries, limit what should be the outcome within the set parameters. It should enable potential problems per se. Component of research design, definitely yes. The title of the investigation which pertains to the problem, purpose of the study, the outcome of the study, should it be beneficial and in what fashion? Review of the related literature. Exactly, it is assumed or it is presumed probably that you are not the first one pioneers in doing a research in an upcoming field. People might have actually dabbled on the research altogether. What was their outcomes? Can we study their literature? Can we study their outcomes? Can we study their results, their report? And what do we bring it out? The synopsis out of, so review of related literature is very important. Statement of the problem and the scope of the investigation. The scope of the investigation will define the perimeter of the research problem per se. So yes, objectives of the study, the variables nature that we are talking around here, what should be going around. Now there might be, and the objective can be one, and it can be your hypothesis, be it a null or alternative, but variables can be plentiful. This is what variables is all about. It there can be n numbers of variables, and the more the variables are, the more easy, the accurate the result would always be. We have already said about the hypothesis per se, the null hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis that comes around here. The objective of the study is the problem. The selection of the sample, remember, we have a definitely a round of population that comes around it. This is the sample that we might have taken altogether for you to understand as to which represent the population altogether. So yes, we have taken the sample. It might be a random sample that goes around it. And why we are talking, because this represents the complete population. Data collection, now data collection exactly should be collected at the source of where the problem is all about, it from the sample, from the horse's mouth, and then probably should be sequenced, should be manicured, should be data should be mined, extreme data should be negated, and probably then comes the analysis of the data as the case might be. Types of research design: experimental design, non-experimental design. Two types that we keep on talking around it. We have been speaking about this survey design. Now we'll talk about the experimental design. Experimental design within a controlled environment, and non-experimental design without a controlled environment. Probably it happens on its natural surroundings. So yes, there are two types. One is quasi-experimental and one is experimental. Experimental, where we try to elongate the existing body of knowledge. Quasi-experimental is we try to do exactly opposite what is expected out of it. So if, for example, if it rains, we should take umbrella. So let us have a quasi experimental that if it rains, we will not take umbrella and we'll get wet. What happens is, if we get wet, the chances of our getting sick is high. Rather than an experimental basis, is it better that we should take a rain umbrella or a raincoat? Or should we not actually venture outdoors at all? We should not get ourselves wet in the rains at all. So there are quasi-experimental, which is exactly opposite to the outcome that was expected. Can we do something around it? And then something called experimental, all about it. Non-experimental designs are case study methods. Obviously is the content analysis, the ethnographic, the focus group, the network analysis, and sociometric. Now this is a non-experimental design. What happens in historical literature? In historical literature, many authors would have contributed towards their understanding. Can we study their literature? Can we study their perspective? Can we come up with an outcome and see how many of them have similar viewpoint of views? So that is what the content analysis would all be all about it. Ethnography is where people would be specific to certain beliefs, certain values altogether. Focus groups, yes, definitely yes, under the subject, under the community, which has been experiences uh, certain harshness or certain liberties altogether. What happens with the focus group? How does it react in case a particular experiment is being worked upon them? Then we talk about the network analysis and the sociometric thereby. Now we'll talk about hypothesis. The purpose of hypothesis testing is to determine whether there are enough empirical evidence in favor of a certain belief. As did I say about rain, your umbrella, the raincoat, should we get sick or not with the umbrella, with the raincoat, without the umbrella, without the raincoat? what are the probabilities? The hypothesis is preliminary, a tentative explanation of postulate by researcher of what researchers considers the outcome. As I have said, the null hypothesis, the researchers consider out of this experiment, he or she predicts certain particular outcome is going to come. But then the researcher should be always be ready that particular outcome will not be achieved. In fact, the contradictory outcome can happen, and that is what the beauty of the alternative hypothesis is all about. It, remember, hypothesis is nothing but informed and educated guess. It indicates the expectation of the researcher regarding certain variable. It is the most specific ways in which to answer a problem can be stated. So define hypothesis, a tentative statement about a population parameter that might be true, that might be wrong. So we have a null hypothesis and we have an alternative hypothesis per se. The difference, let us understand the difference between the title of the project, which states the problem, and the hypothesis. Both hypothesis and problem contribute to the body of language which supports or probably refutes the existing theory. Remember, hypothesis is different than the problem. A problem is formulated in a form of question, it serves as a basis or origin from which hypothesis is derived from. Yes, from the problem only we come arrive into a certain solution, right? And hypothesis is the suggested solution to a problem. The assumption that has been taken by the researcher, which becomes a null hypothesis, and the alternative hypothesis, which is just bang opposite to the null hypothesis. A problem question cannot be directly tested, whereas an hypothesis can be tested, can be verified, can be quantified also, to what probability, to what degree it happens around it. So yes, a problem cannot be directly tested, but an hypothesis can be. So when is hypothesis formulated? If immediately after the problem has been defined, that which we will start going about. Better if we have defined the problem and then perhaps done a literature survey regarding the problem, so that we come to a conclusion that which all authors, which all researchers have come with certain variant degree of agreeableness or disagreeableness to the stated problem, whether they have acknowledged the problem or not. So then is the right time to formulate the hypothesis. Remember, the researcher is completely aware of everything about the literatures, about the problem, about the theoretical aspect, about the empirical background to the problem. That is when the hypothesis is going to be forming upon it, because now researchers will be certain to a certain degree what is the expected outcome. It offers explanation for relationship between those variables. Remember, my example was rain, umbrella, and raincoat, which is better, or even not venturing out in the rain. It furnishes proof that the researcher has sufficient background knowledge to enable him or her to make suggestion in order to extend existing knowledge. It gives directions to an investigation. It structures the next phase in the investigation and therefore furnishes continuity to the examination of the problem as the case might be, is what we all look after it. So characteristics of an hypothesis, it should be elucidating power. It should strive to furnish an acceptable explanation of the problem. It must be verifiable. It must be formulated in simple, most layman languages, understandable term. It should correspond with existing knowledge per se, and that is what hypothesis should all be all about it. Remember, that is what we are looking about it. Hypothesis should give exact outcome, exact understanding, exact explanation. It should be very well accepted by everyone, be it the scientific community or the layman person. So descriptive hypothesis, these are the hypotheses that describe the characteristic, let's say the size, the form, or the distribution. This is what we are looking into it. The variable may be an object, person, organization. Example, the rate of unemployment among arts graduates is much higher than that of commerce graduate. The educational system is not oriented to human resources needs of the country. This is one of the hypotheses, as in then arts graduate or humanities graduates are not more employable than the commerce graduate. In fact, should I say the commerce graduate are more employable. So relational, how this is a descriptive hypothesis. Now let us go with the hypothesis called relational. This hypothesis is between the two variables. That is what we want to go around it. Between two variables as on when on basis. Families with higher income spend more on recreation. Example. So upper class people have fewer children than the lower class people. The outcome is about this thing. Causal hypothesis. It states the existing of or a change in one variable causes leads to an effect to another variable. The first variable is called independent variable. The latter is a dependent variable per se, and this is how we go across it. When dealing with a causal relationship between variables, the researcher must consider the direction in which such relationship flow, as in what caused the effect or what was the effect for the causes. Working hypothesis is while planning the study of the problem, hypotheses are formed. Initially, they may not be very specific. In such cases, they are referred to as working hypotheses, which are subject to modification as investigation proceeds and goes around it. Null hypothesis is a hypothesis that is formulated for testing statistical significance. Remember, statistical significance, since this form is a convenient approach to statistical analysis, as the test would nullify the null hypothesis. Example, there is a relationship between the family's income, expenditure on recreation. A null hypothesis may state there is no relation between family incomes and expenditure on recreation per se. What is a statistical hypothesis? These are the statement of a statistical problem, of a statistical population. These are derived from the sample. These are nothing but quantitative in nature, and they are very much measurable in numbers. So group A, example being, is an elder to group B. So the average age, the median age of group A is more than that of group B. So that is what statistical hypothesis would all about it. It is always into numbers and it's been very concrete. Where in null hypothesis we have an understanding of statistical significance, and we can always test the null hypothesis which was been mentioned out here. In the null hypothesis says there is a relationship between a family's income and expenditure on recreation. A null hypothesis may state there is no relationship. So there is a relationship and there is no relationship. That is what we are looking into the null hypothesis scenario altogether. So we keep on talking around here. I hope this is clear with all of you. So there are two relationships that goes around. We have no relations and a relationship that comes around it, and that is what comes is very important for null hypothesis and statistical hypothesis. Statistical hypothesis will be concrete in number. Common sense hypothesis, it states the existence of empirical uniformities perceived on a day-to-day observation. Did I say about rain, umbrella, raincoat, and sickness or ill health? Example: shop assistant in small shop lack motivation. Probably common sense hypothesis. Why? Probably they are not rewarded accordingly. The amount of labor that they put in is not equivalent amount of rewards that they get back. Complex hypotheses are the aim that test existence of logical derived relationship between empirical uniformities. Example, in the early stage human ecology, describe empirical uniformities in the distribution of land values, industrial concentration, types of business, and other phenomena per se, and that is what we look forward to it. Analytical hypothesis is concerned with the relationship of analytical variable. These hypotheses occurs at the highest level as the case might be, and this is what we are looking around it. Absolutely at the highest level. The specific relationship between the changes in one property and there is a change in another property. So what are we talking about it? Sun, probably no umbrella. Rain, probably umbrella. So there's a change in one property and there's a change in another. So depending upon the rain and the absence of rain, we'll take umbrellas or not umbrellas. Example, the study of human fertility may show empirical regularities by wealth, education, religion, and probably of region. So the richer people, do they have more children if they are rich, they are educated, or in a particular region or religion, belong to a certain religion? Or is it not so wealthy people? Are they going to define the number of children by their wealth, education, region, or religion per se? So yes, characteristics of good hypothesis is conceptual clarity, specificity, testability, availability of techniques. So these are hypotheses. Hypothesis needs to be verified. These needs to be understood time and again. There has to be clear understanding. There has to be a particular outcome that comes around here. Absolutely sure that comes needs to be done. Testability, availability of techniques from different approaches that we come around it. From different approaches, if we attack a problem or if we try to solve a problem, does it helps us? And how do we go around it? So that is what availability of techniques are all about it. Theoretically relevance, if the outcome from this approach, the outcome of this approach, the outcome of this approach comes to a similar solution, it is relevant. It should be consistent, it should be objective, it should be simple to understand and implement. And that is what the characteristics of good hypothesis is all about it. Now, before I wind up this presentation, let me give you the theories. The sources of hypothesis are your literature survey, the theories, the observation that you go around it, the analogies, what people keep on seeing around, and people, the wisdom states around it, intuitions of personal experiences of the researcher himself or herself. Findings of the study will always help you. The state of knowledge, the culture, and the continuity of researches that comes around it. Probably your research is just an extension of the previous research which was done by another author elsewhere in the world. So you are trying to just extend the potential of knowledge, and that is what the sources of this hypothesis will all about it. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video till the end.